All right, guys. I guess we'll just get started. So, thanks so much, everybody, for joining. As people join, we'll let them in. So, my name is Sherjan. I'm excited to be speaking with you guys. I've been to Singapore, and I have a long history. I used to actually, it was one of the first international events I ever taught. Was in actually Singapore in 2013. That was the first time I came to Singapore, and so I have a long history with NUS. So I'm pretty excited to be here. And excited to talk to you guys, hopefully future entrepreneurs. So the quick kind of gist of what we're going to do today is I'm going to walk you guys through a little bit of my background. I'm not going to bore you too much with my background, but what I want to focus this talk or this 30 minutes on is, going from, let's just say, corporate jobs to, starting your own startup. As you guys are all part of the Entrepreneurship Society, I think it's a great, start for your own entrepreneurship journey. But as you probably know, a lot of people end up going for corporate roles, working at Goldman Sachs, McKinsey, Temasek, and those kind of companies, and startups seem, and feel a lot less appealing. So what I want to do today is I want you guys to learn as much as you can from me. This is your chance to kind of learn from someone who has gone from being a vice president in investment banking to leaving that and starting his own startup. And also, starting a startup that ultimately failed, right? So point is not to be like, hey, fearful about why certain things work and why they don't. Point is, like, if you're passionate about something, you should build it. So just before we start, everybody, like Z, Marcus, you, Deming, all the people who've just joined, we have a rule which is cameras on. So please turn your cameras on so that we can all be very interactive, and that way I can also see what everybody's thinking. And if you have questions, you can always kind of raise your hand or put the questions in the bottom. All right, so quick background about myself. I'm from Pakistan originally, but I grew up in Canada, and I studied engineering. And I wasn't a particularly good engineer, to be honest with you. I was a pretty bad engineer. I had a pretty low GPA. I had a 3.0 GPA, but I wanted to be an investment banker. And so I tried really hard, and I did my best to network and connect with folks, and ended up getting a break in the US investment banking world at this small investment banking firm called Houlihan Lokey. I worked there for a few months, loved it, but didn't, like it that much. I always was passionate about tech, and somehow figured my way out through networking to join Morgan Stanley's tech investment banking team in San Francisco, which is basically south of San Francisco, called Menlo Park. So I worked there for 2 years as an analyst in investment banking, loved it. That was kind of like my passion, really enjoyed it. And after that, I joined, so I left Morgan Stanley. A lot of people, when they, finish investment banking for 2 years as an analyst, especially in the West, they go join some sort of private equity or some sort of growth equity or venture capital firm. So I joined Google after Morgan Stanley, and I joined their venture capital arm, which was called Google Capital. Now that group is called Capital G. I was there for a couple of years as well, with a main focus of investing in Asia. So my primary focus was looking at companies and startups and tech companies in China, Singapore, Taiwan, even some stuff in Hong Kong, and also especially India. So I did that for a couple of years, and then luck would have it, Morgan Stanley came back in my life, and I actually moved back to Morgan Stanley in Hong Kong, covering the private equity sector in Asia. So I was in investment banking again in Hong Kong from 2015 till 2017. So that's been my journey, and I was a vice president in Morgan Stanley then. So that's just the beginning of my journey, and I think that's important for you guys to understand. A lot of you probably are passionate about startups, which is a good thing, but the safer route seems like to go join corporate, and that's totally fine. And I think early on in your career, it's actually good to join corporate and learn from how things are done at a McKinsey or a Goldman Sachs or even a Google, and see how big companies run things, and you'll learn a lot of stuff. Not only that, you'll also build credibility. You'll build a brand, so people will know that you are someone who has, a track record. And after you've built that credibility, then it's a lot easier to start a startup, because you can always go back to things that you have left. So what I want to, focus today's topic on is, leaving corporate and starting your own startup, and why someone does that. And then the second piece of it, in terms of what I wanted to kind of talk to you guys about, is like, what are some of the pros and cons of starting your own startup. And then what I'll do is I'll open up the floor so you guys can interact with me and ask me questions. So if everybody's good with that, what I want to, and if you guys have any questions, you can always put it in the chat. And I want this to be super interactive so that we can interact as a group. So any questions you guys have, just put it in the chat. You can also privately chat with me, so that if you don't want your question to be public, that's totally fine. All right. So the first thing I want to talk to you guys about is why I left Morgan Stanley, or why, in my opinion, if you actually come up to that situation and you have to leave your, cool, juicy corporate job with a good brand name that your parents love that you work there, right? Why should you leave that? The first thing I think in terms of like leaving a really good brand or a really good company has to come from the fact, what is the current situation, right? So when I think about my time back at Morgan Stanley, I had recently been promoted to vice president. And I was super excited. I was on a high. I was like, this is great. Things are looking great from a career perspective. But when you look at corporate, companies in general, usually speaking, when you're an analyst or an associate, meaning you're a junior role, you're learning a lot. You're learning how to do Excel, how to build models, how to build, presentations. You're learning the business a lot in a much deeper way. But when you become a VP or higher, the job basically becomes the same. Every day becomes the same thing. So the first thing that I think you will have to assess as you get into that point in your life, hopefully in the future, is what is my learning experience like, and is that experience getting plateaued? So every day, are you learning something new? And to me, when I became a VP, I was not learning anything new. I mean, there were some things you will learn new, like you will learn how to have client meetings in a much slightly different way because you're interacting more with clients. But you're not actually growing on a mental level, on a level of just like understanding concepts and really growing as a professional. So that's one thing that always bothered me, and that's the issue with a lot of corporate jobs. Once you learn how to do the job in the first 24 months, then it's pretty much the same, and that's okay. For a lot of people, that's fine, but you have to make a decision on that if that's okay for you, right? So that was the first thing why I was kind of like, I'm not really happy, because the learning experience is pretty much plateaued when I reached that VP part. The second thing I think that's important is it's the same thing, different day, right? So when you get to a certain level in a company, and any company, doesn't have to be a Morgan Stanley or a Google, any company you're part of, if you're doing the same thing on a daily basis, like you show up, you check your email, you sign some documents, you check some presentations, you make sure the model is good, then you go to a client meeting and present it, and you put that on repeat on a daily basis, at some point you'll get bored, right? There's no excitement left. And for some people, like I said, that's fine. And we need people like that who will always do the same thing on a daily basis, and they're very happy with it. Nothing wrong with that. But for other people like yourself who are focused on entrepreneurship and building and starting new things, you are always, your creative engine is always flowing, right? So you're always trying to build new things. Your mind is always going 1,000 miles an hour, thinking of new ideas, new concepts. You're always envisioning things, right? Now that doesn't really happen when you get to a corporate job at a later stage. So that was the second thing where I would just like, what, I'm doing the same thing every day, and I don't want to do that. The third piece was, for me, I've always been an entrepreneur. Even when I was in undergrad at your stage, so you guys are all in undergrad right now. And when I was in undergrad at your age, I basically had a startup that I started, which was a photography company. So back then they were just called small businesses. It wasn't a tech company. It was just a pure small business. And that was my passion. While being a student at University of Toronto, I was, photographing weddings and photographing school events on the side. And that's what I did. That was my side hustle, let's just say. But then when I, graduated and started my investment banking job, I started this business, which is a coaching business that I've been running for almost 10 years now. And this was run in parallel to my Morgan Stanley career, Google career, and then Morgan Stanley again. So for me, the entrepreneurship gene has always been in my heart, even if I'm working at a corporate. So when I got promoted to vice president at Morgan Stanley, I asked the senior leadership, I was like, hey, I think there's a lot of opportunity in Southeast Asia, so Singapore, Indonesia, and that region. Why don't I create a new group in Southeast Asia, which covers young tech companies, right? So if you think about Singapore, obviously Grab is a big company now, but if you rewind 10 years ago, it was a very, very small company, right? Similarly, I'm sure a lot of you will start your own startups, and there's a lot of that growth that's going to come from that region. So there's no one at Morgan Stanley at that time, I don't know if they have now, but at that time, who was covering Singapore and Indonesia from an early tech perspective, from an early stage tech perspective. So I said, why don't we create a new group? I'll lead the group. I'll get a couple of people who I'll hire for that team. Will still be Morgan Stanley, but this would allow me to do what I love doing. So senior leadership was like, no, majority of the opportunity is going to be in China, which is true. Majority of the opportunity for a bank like Morgan Stanley is in China. But for me, I didn't want to cover China tech because it's too mature of an industry. I love doing things that are a little bit more early. So seeing that, I was just like, you know what, this is, if I can't create, if I can't build something, which is something that I'm naturally inclined to do, then I'm not going to, be in that location. The fourth thing that I had, which I think you guys can also put into your own matrix as you guys decide on any decision, especially as a career decision, is look up in the organization and see, what is the role that my manager is playing? How is his or her life, or your manager's manager or their manager? Because if you do your job the best way possible and you're the best at doing your job, ultimately you'll end up getting your boss's job, right? So if you look at your boss and you're like, you know what, I don't really want to have that job 5 years from now or 10 years from now, then that's a great sign for you to be like, you know what, this is not where I should be building my career. So for me, I saw my boss and she was amazing. She's amazing and she's one of the best at the firm, but I don't want to get her job. That's not something that's appealing to me, right? And similarly, her boss's job, like our managing director, his life wasn't something that was appealing to me. He's always on his BlackBerry, always stressed, always running from one meeting to another meeting, not having time to spend with family. And I was just like, that's not something that I want to be doing. And then they're always, on the helm of like clients. Clients are always like, hey, where is this? Even if it's a Sunday midnight, where is this thing? Where is this thing? And I was like, man, like 10 years from now, if I'm a managing director at Morgan Stanley doing this, this is not the life that I wanted. So very easy way for you to figure out why you want to change directions or change trajectory. So I looked up and did that. The final reason why I left from an aspect of internal is, for me, I always value happiness over everything else, right? Now, people always say, what excites you, right? There's money, there's rank, there's, cool things you can buy, brand name, all those cool things, right? Now, those things are great. So as you guys start your career, let's just say, and you get a job at Temasek, or you get a job at Goldman Sachs or McKinsey or Google, great brand, that's awesome. You'll get paid a lot, you'll get a good title, all that good stuff. But as you progress in your career, there'll come a time where those things won't matter to you. Like, you're not going to be like everywhere you go and be like, hey, guess what? I work at Google. You already work at Google for the last 4 or 5 years. You're not going to really care. And you're also not going to really care how much money they give you. Maybe money doesn't motivate you as much, right? Similarly, maybe title doesn't motivate you. Like, they can be like, hey, we'll make you vice president, which is great, but you're not really, passionate about that. Like, it doesn't really change your life. What changes your life is how creative you are, especially as an entrepreneur. What are you building? What are you, doing with the time that you have? And are you, building something that you're passionate about? And to me, one of the simplest measures that I have is whenever I wake up, I, ask myself, am I happy for that day? Like, am I excited that I'm getting up and, getting out of bed and really, excited to start the day and do whatever I'm about to do? And the truth is, when I hit a job where I feel like I'm getting out of bed and I'm just like tired, not excited to go to, do the job, and it doesn't matter how well the job pays me and how expensive my suit is and what the brand on my business card is and what my title is, if I'm not happy personally, I'm not going to keep that job for the reasons of just having the job. So let me just pause there, by the way. Boyoung, Cornes, Wuling, Li Chen, all of you guys who just joined, can we please have your cameras on so that I can see you guys as well? It just helps me as well and makes the event more fun versus you guys just hiding. And if you guys are waking up, which is totally fine, no worries. I didn't do my hair either, so it's totally okay. All right. So just turn your cameras on, and it helps me kind of engage with you guys a little bit better and get to see what everybody's up to. All right. So basically, those are the 5 main reasons why I was leaving from an aspect of internal. Like, what did I not love about Morgan Stanley, right? And then now let's talk about what did I love about what I was about to do, like doing a startup. So the first thing I think, like I mentioned, and I think this is something that you guys will understand because you guys are all entrepreneurial in nature, is you want to build. As a creative person, you're always excited about ideas. Like, for me on my phone, I have a list of ideas in my notes app that is always, anytime I get an idea, even walking down the street, taking the train, meeting someone. Today I was at a sushi restaurant and I had a really cool idea because I saw the chef do something, and it was something that was interesting. And I was like, this could be an actual tech idea that could really help this business. So I wrote it down in my phone. So I'm always, on the creative side of things. And that makes me excited about things. So now building a startup, when you go for the startup route, you are being creative on a daily basis, right? Because you're working on your idea, you're trying to meet customers, you're trying to build, you're trying to get feedback, you're trying to get new customers, you're trying to hopefully hold on to customers, you're building a product, you're debugging it. All of that stuff requires just full-on creative thinking. And the best part about that is like you're constantly building, and if that's something that's in you, you're gonna do. So I was at that stage where I was like, you know what? I've been a corporate employee for the last 10 years or so, probably like 8 years at that time. And I had done startups on the side, but I wanted to flip that. I wanted to do startup full-time for the first time in my life and go all in and see what happens. So that's the first reason why it was exciting to me to just go do a startup. The second was just taking risk, right? When you're at that stage, so I was 29 or 30, I think. I was probably 30 back then. I was 30 years old when I left to do my startup. When you're younger and it's early part of your career, it's a lot easier to take risks, right? Because you don't have a mortgage, probably. You don't have a lot of massive loans, or you don't have a family to feed or kids. There's less responsibilities as a young person. And when you're young like that, you have a lot more chance to be nimble and kind of block and tackle and try new things, because there's a high chance you'll fail, which is totally fine. And if you fail at an early stage, that's great. You can get back up and try something else or go back to what you were doing before. So for me, being 30 years old, I had saved up enough money. And I was like, you know what, if I fail at this, which is gonna happen, 99% of startups fail, I can still get back on my feet and I still have most of my career left. So as you start your startup, I would highly recommend start it early, right? Versus waiting until you're 40 or 45 and older, because it gets harder and harder because you get a lot more responsibilities just as being a human, right? So it was the right, time for me to take that risk. And I was okay with that. Like I was okay with accepting failure. The next piece was, for me, I had an idea that I was super passionate about, right? So that's another important thing as you guys think about building your startup. A lot of people, just sit there and start thinking of ideas and hope to get one. That's the hard way, and that's the wrong way. I think what you need to be doing is you need to be just living your life, and as ideas come, you should start evaluating them. So this list that I have on my phone, so I have about, if I open it right now, I have about 20-ish or so ideas on that list. Every week or so, whenever I get some time, I go through that list and I rank the ideas up and down, because I learn new information, right? For example, I got an idea the other day, which was like, let's just say I get an idea for Uber. Like, okay, let's create a new Uber, for example. And then another idea I had was, let's just say, let's create Airbnb. Now, every week or every few weeks, I'll go to that list and I'll, validate which one is still a better idea than the rest. So as you do that over time, what's going to happen is the best ideas will become number one, and all the other ideas that you think are just not easy to do, too risky, not feasible, not your core expertise, they're going to come down, right? So for me, there's a lot of ideas that I thought are great ideas, but they're now at the bottom of my list. And then there's some ideas that never thought I, would be, feasible or would have high potential. They're now at the top of the list. And any idea that's at the top of the list or the top 2 ideas in my list, I'm constantly thinking about that, right? So when I was at Morgan Stanley, I was thinking about this idea that I had, which was related to the recruiting space. And that's a space that I'm passionate about because I've been coaching students for the last 10 years. So I started thinking about this idea a lot more. And as I started thinking about it, I started talking to more people about it. As I talked to more people about it, I was like finally sharpening that idea, polishing it, and really figuring out what would work, what could go wrong, all those things, while still being at Morgan Stanley, right? So my risk appetite was a lot, higher because I wanted to do this, but at the same time, I was being careful because I was like, you know what? I still have a good job. Let's just keep it until I'm 100% sure this is the idea. So once that idea became a reality, I had enough signal from the market, I had investors who were, lined up. I had personally done a lot of research on the idea where I said, okay, this is a thing that should exist, and here's how we can build it. I had met a good co-founder, which is another important thing to have if you're trying to build something and you don't have expertise in it. Get a good co-founder who you can work with. All of those things align. And once those things align, then by then, I probably 4 or 5 months had gone by, right? From the beginning of, when I got promoted to me just brewing this idea. And then I was like, okay, you know what? Now everything has been aligned. I'm ready to take this risk. I'm ready to go build and be creative. And it's an idea that I'm happy to, be behind for the next 2 years at a minimum. And finally, I'm happy if it fails. I'm okay if it fails, right? Because worst case it fails, which is generally the case, I'll be fine. I'll come back to Morgan Stanley, or I'll start something new, or whatever else, right? So So that was kind of the thought process of how I thought about building this. I'm gonna take a quick break here. Zinwan, can we turn your camera on? Shane as well, and Lo Sheng Rong, Justin, and Wuling, all four of you. I can see you guys don't have your cameras on. Please turn your cameras on. I would really appreciate it. All right, so any questions so far from the team that I can answer? Please, put it in the chat. And then I have a few other questions that I'm seeing from people, so I'll answer that as we go along. And by the way, you guys can ask me anything related to struggles of startups, to how to come up with ideas, how to find co-founders, how to raise money, any of that stuff, right? Anything that's on your mind that you're thinking of, even geography, even sectors, whatever's on your mind, I'm happy to answer. So this is your chance to ask that. All right, so the next thing I want to talk to you guys about is on the concept of what are the pros and cons as you guys think about starting a startup. So before we go to that, I would love to kind of get a idea of, everybody kind of just raising their hands. How many people here want to start a startup right after university? So just put your hand up if you want to start one right after university. Okay, all right. And then how many, want to do it in terms of, sometimes in their next 5 years, let's just say. Okay, so there's some people, but there's some people who are still hesitant, right? So I want to talk to you guys a little bit about why, it's the wrong idea to do a startup, so the bad reasons, and then also talk about a little bit what are the good reasons. So first, let's talk about the good reasons, right? And I think a lot of you guys know kind of the good reasons, but I'll kind of just mention it. The first thing is startups allow you to have that ultimate freedom, right? You get to build whatever you want. There's no boss. You are the one who's in charge. You decide when you wake up, when you sleep. You build whatever you want. You work with whoever you want, right? All of that stuff. And that, freedom is addicting, right? Once you, build a startup, I'll tell you, it's very hard to go back to corporate. Not that, corporate's not going to hire you. Corporates love hiring people who've gone through a startup and come back because it builds you in a much more impressive way. But the problem is you yourself, you don't want to go back and be caged again, right? You don't want to go back and, listen to someone else, telling you what to do because you're a free person. So that's the first thing. I think that's a beautiful thing of doing a startup. And I love that, and even though my last startup failed, I didn't go back to corporate. I'm still thinking about my next idea and have another couple of ideas that I'm really refining. And the best part is, this is the second reason why you do a startup, the learning experience, right? People always throw this around that, hey, what is the learning experience? I'll give you an example. When I was at Morgan Stanley, you have all of these support groups that help you do your job. So for example, if I want to get a legal document signed, we have a lawyer on staff at Morgan Stanley who's going to sign the legal document, right? Or if, let's just say, I need to collect money from a deal that we just did, there are systems in the bank that allow you to do that, right? If I need to print some materials, there's a group in the office that prints all the materials, the decks and presentations for me. But when you do a startup, everything, especially as a founder, is on your desk. You have to take ownership of it and you have to learn it, right? So for example, if I'm signing an NDA with an investor, at Morgan Stanley, I would just sign it and, because I'm protected by the firm, right? But when you're doing a startup, you got to read every word of that NDA. You got to make sure you're protected. So you'll go read all these terms and stuff and get a mini lawyer, law degree just to understand some of these legal terms. Point is, you learn so much. And within literally 6 months, you'll learn everything from legal things. You'll learn how to hire people. You'll learn how to fire people, which is even harder to do, by the way, especially good people that you enjoyed working with. You'll learn how to build things. You learn how to deal with customers, good customers, and especially bad customers. You learn how to raise money. Raising money is one of the hardest things, guys, right? No matter how good your idea is, it's so hard to get someone else to give you even $1, right? And then you learn how to be rejected all the time because, you'll go meet 100 investors and, 90 of them will be like, oh, we love your idea. We want to put money in. But then when you go actually raise the money, 80 of them will be like, hey, I think I'm going to pass. So you start realizing what's true and what's not. So the learning experience is the second thing that I think it's unmatched. And you cannot get that kind of learning experience anywhere else. It doesn't matter if you're working at McKinsey, Temasek, Google, Facebook, whatever, right? This experience when you do a startup is just another level of it. And finally, I think it's commanding your own destiny, right? Whatever you put in is what you're going to get out, right? In the work in Morgan Stanley or Google or Goldman Sachs or some of these other companies, it's a different thing. You're kind of on the step ladder, and there's a guaranteed path up. If you do your job 9 to 5, you'll get to the second day. You do that job again, you'll get to the second day. So there's a lot more guarantee. But in a startup, you control your own destiny. You know, the the harder you work, the smarter you work, the more, you know, block and tackle you do, and the more informed you are about your space, the more the better outcome you could potentially have. So you're basically in charge of your ship, and any micro decision to macro decision you make will ultimately affect what happens. And there's a certain beauty to that, which I think excites me and maybe excites you guys as well. So those are the reasons why I think if someone wants to do a startup and they're really passionate about building something, go do it. Don't wait for, you know, what the world will say and your ego, your brand, all that stuff. Let that be on the side. If there's an idea that you think is worth pursuing and you'll be excited doing it, definitely pursue it. So now I just want to quickly talk about why you shouldn't do a startup, or what are the negatives of a startup. The first one, and this is, you know, I can't reiterate this, it is one of the hardest things you'll do in terms of a career. Just building something on your own from scratch is extremely hard, right? Not only that, it's just like when people say, what's hard about it? Well, there's a million things hard about it that are apparent, like building a product that customers love. That's hard, right? It just is. Getting customers to pay you even a single dollar is hard, right? Getting investors to give you a single dollar for your startup is extremely hard. Convincing people is hard, right? Dealing with competition is tough. Hiring good people is one of the hardest things, you know, because you got to convince someone who's working at Google, making $300,000, and you got to be like, hey, Jenny, I want you to come join me and I'll pay you $50,000, right? That's a tough sale, right? That's a tough pitch. But you have to, as a founder, if you really believe in your idea, you'll have to have those tough conversations. I remember when I hired my co-founder, I actually interviewed almost 35 co-founders, and then ended up with who I ended up with, who's amazing. Similarly, when I hired my 10 employees, I think I probably interviewed over 300 engineers to get to my first hire, which was the engineering hire. So the point is, it is a very, very tough job, and all of those things are extremely hard. I think someone's microphone is on. Can we make sure people's microphones are muted? So that's kind of, you know, the hard part is that. But the other hard part that I think is not apparent is doing a startup is extremely lonely, right? You're the one who's the founder or the co-founder, and you have friends and stuff who are obviously in your court and supporting you and all that good stuff. But you're in that journey alone, right? When you are spending late nights trying to figure something out, when you're dealing with you know, a bad investor or a bad customer or an employee who's not performing, you have to take ownership of all of that. So startups become extremely, extremely hard and lonely. And the other part they become lonely is you don't have time for friends and family, right? You're basically working 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's no weekends in a startup, right? When you're a founder, especially, there are no weekends. Every day, Saturday, Sunday, whatever, you work. Like for me, for example, today is a Saturday where I am. I'm in Toronto, right? And it's almost 10 p.m. here on a Saturday. If I worked in a corporate, right now I'd be enjoying, you know, at some bar drinking beer, right? But because I run a startup, Saturday is work day for me. Doesn't matter if it's Saturday or if it's a Monday. So those are the sacrifices you make, and it becomes really, really hard. And I'll share an article with you guys. I want you guys to definitely read it, because as you guys start a startup, the first 12 months are the hardest, time of a startup. So I'll share this article. Whenever you guys have a chance, I basically summarize all the stuff that happens in a startup. So I'm going to share this link. So when you get a chance, read this article that I wrote, which basically summarizes what happens in the first 12 months of a startup, right? And from fundraising to hiring to building your product to meeting investors to, you know, getting rejected and all that stuff. And I've broken it down into like 5 sections. So definitely read this before you go and jump into the whole, you know, startup game. The second piece is why startups are hard and bad, and there's a con of it, is most likely you will fail, right? And it's important to understand that. Don't go into startup assuming you will be successful. You know, that's the easiest way to fail and the quickest way to fail if you think you're going to be successful. Because the worst thing is your ego is going to be hurt. And if you're someone who feels like you should always be successful, right, then you're going to, you know, learn a very bad lesson pretty early on, right? So for me, I've worked at good firms and stuff, but I'm okay failing, right? I'm okay with failing, and I've accepted it. So before I jump into this category of startups, I'm okay knowing that, you know what, there's a 99% chance this company will fail. And everybody that I hired in my company, I told them, hey, I'm going to promise you one thing. There's a very high chance a year from now, you're not going to have a job, right? Is that okay for you? If that's okay, then come join me, right? But if that's not okay for you and you can't take that risk, then I would recommend against joining this startup, right? So just knowing that and having that understanding is important. But just want to add an additional point to that is one thing you should always understand is that, yes, most startups fail, but most founders succeed. And that's an important thing. Just because a company failed doesn't mean the founder failed as well, right? Because as a founder, what is a startup? You're building something, you're learning something, you're going on this journey, you're trying to solve a problem. Yes, the problem didn't solve, right? But you as a person learned so much along the way. You grew so much. You became a better person, became a better builder, became more creative. You learned how to hire, how to fire, how to do marketing, sales, all of that stuff, legal. So for me, for example, even though my last startup failed, I have learned so much stuff from that last experience, the last 24 months or 36 months that I ran that company, that now when I start my next one, I'm not going to make some of those mistakes that I made the first time around, right? I may not raise money from some of the investors that I didn't like. I may not go for some customers that I think are going to be more problematic than the other customers, right? I may not focus on certain geographies over other geographies because I've learned that. Similarly, I won't spend marketing dollars on one channel over the other channel. Point is, as a founder, as a builder, as a creative, you actually succeed even if the startup fails. So just make sure you understand that. And the final piece, I think startups are bad and you shouldn't do it if for you, you're not as strong in terms of handling stress and having mental stress, right? So like I said, startups are hard, they're lonely, there are more days that you fail than you succeed. And it's always an uphill battle on a regular basis. So that basically means on a constant level, you're always facing a lot of stress. And if you're someone who can't handle stress and gets really worried about things and can't keep a steady focus on what the ultimate goal is, then startups are not a good place for you, and they can actually hurt you on a mental health level. So, and I don't want that to happen to anybody. So make sure as you go into a startup, make sure you have enough support from friends, girlfriend, boyfriend, parents, whatever, where you yourself believe that you have the mental and physical health to handle it, because that stuff can really come up and creep up on. All right, so that's kind of the high level of what I want to talk about. I know I've spoken for a while. What I want to do now is I want to answer a bunch of questions people have. So when you get a chance, you can put questions on the bottom. So I'm just going to read the first one. I'm very impressed on how you took the leap of faith from big firm to something. Do you mind sharing about your motivations to join JP Morgan at the start of your career? So I think you meant Morgan Stanley. So I worked at Morgan Stanley, not JP Morgan. JP Morgan's a great firm as well. So my motivation was I wanted to be in the best investment banking. I wanted to be an investment banker to begin with, right? That's what I wanted to do after college. And I had a low GPA. I was a non-business major, studied aerospace engineering, was an international student. So there's a lot of things that were going against me. But I knew that the best of the kids that were in my college, who were the smartest kids, went to investment banking. So for me, there was one of those things where like, I want to get something that I can't get, but I want to go get it. Or at least I want to try to get it. And for Morgan Stanley, obviously Morgan Stanley's tech investment banking group in Menlo Park, is the #1 group in the world. And I didn't think I had any chance of getting that, right? There was a 0.0001% chance of me even getting an interview. But point is, it wasn't like an overnight success. It took many, many years to build towards it, and taking many, many paths and many turns and left and rights to try to get to it. But ultimately, I wanted to get there. And if I didn't make it there, no worries. I would have taken second best and third best. It's just that the way I networked, the way I prepared, the way I hustled and connected with people, I ultimately got that. So, for me, motivation was that, and it ended up happening. The second motivation was, for me, I always say this: always be grateful, but never be satisfied, right? So that's a very important line. Anything you guys do, always be grateful, right? You guys are at NUS, great school, but is it Harvard? No, right? But that doesn't mean like you should not be grateful. I think everybody has amazing opportunity. Doesn't matter where they come from and stuff. So you should be grateful for who you are, where you are. You guys have families and stuff in Singapore. You're in one of the world's best countries, and it's just ripe for disruption. So I think you should be super grateful for that, but don't be satisfied. What that means is start pushing boundaries. And I've noticed this with Singaporean students specifically. A lot of, the Singaporean culture is a very structured culture from what I've seen as an outsider. You go through very structured, education, and then you pass a bunch of tests, and then you go to the next education, and then everybody's super competitive. And they don't, people aren't as, they don't think the same way how people in the West think. I think for you guys, especially as you guys are, entrepreneurially leaning, right? Be open-minded. Go take, risks. Like go to Indonesia for a weekend and see what companies are there. Go take a trip to London and San Francisco if you can and see what companies are there. Go to China, work abroad, right? Do all those things and build things and come out of your shell a little bit. And that should be your motivation. So next question I had is, since you've had experience at Capital G, can you tell us a few reasons which push you to invest in certain businesses? And have you applied this knowledge to others? So I think, when at Capital G, so we were looking at a lot of mid to late stage companies, still private companies, but tech companies mid to late stage. I think when we looked at companies, the most important thing for any business, any investor, is they're going to look at the team. The team is the most important, right? And there's a term in the tech world, which is product market fit, but there's also product market founder fit, right? Meaning how good is this founder for this problem to be solving, right? So as you guys pursue any idea, make sure you think you are the right person to solve, right? For example, I had an idea recently which was related to a religious app, right? So, religion is one of those sectors which has one of the largest market sizes, right? There's like 6 billion people that have a religion, for example, or even more, probably 7 billion people have a religion. And it's a very, sticky market. Everybody who's religious, like I'm sure your parents are religious, maybe you guys are religious, it's a very sticky product. And since birth, people are on their religion. But there's not a lot of tech companies focused on religion, right? So I was thinking about that idea. I was like, man, if you look at Christianity or Islam or even Hinduism, Buddhism, all of these religions have a very sticky customer base. So why can't there be some technology, could be an app, could be a website, could be whatever, that could, do a little bit, like imagine your parents, if there was a religious app they would use it. So I was thinking about that idea, but then I realized I'm not the right guy for it because I'm not very religious, right? I would probably not be a good founder for that, but the product could be good, the market could be good. So that's the first thing. Make sure whatever you go for, we look at the team as the most important thing. And you guys as the founder will be the first thing. The second thing I would say at a high level is a lot of businesses, the way I think about it is, if you look at a spectrum of businesses, on one end of the spectrum, you have lemonade stands, right? The easiest business ever. Buy some lemons, water, juice it up, sell it, buy it for $1, sell it for $2. You make profit of $1, right? That's a lemonade stand. That's a profitable business, great business. On the other end of the spectrum, you have super high tech businesses, right? Like Google, Facebook, Palantir, right? SpaceX, Tesla, very, very high tech businesses, right? But then in the middle, there's a bunch of these businesses that are, which I call lipstick on a pig businesses, right? Meaning they all act like they're cool, they do cool things. Like, a lot of these mattress companies you hear about, you can get a mattress in a box, right? Yeah, but those companies aren't profitable. So really when any company we looked at and invested in, we looked at the fundamentals, right? Does this company make, $2 in revenue, spend $1 on expenses, and then $1 on profit at the end of the day? Is that something this company can do? If that's what this company can do, now can that company do that 100 times bigger if we invest in them? Yes, that's a good business. So at a high level, those would be the criteria, but there's also a million other things we would look at. We would look at the product. We would look at how the product, how the company has been growing, what their roadmap is, what is their competition, how can they, put a moat around their business? What does the market look like? What else is the opportunity around them? Is the opportunity just United States or is it global? How can we help them as investors, right? What is our edge of helping in them? So as you guys look into investors in your future, I think the most important lesson I'll tell you if you go that route is don't take money from someone who is a celebrity. Don't take money from someone who promises you too much. Hey, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this for you. I'm going to do that for you. Truthfully, none of that actually happens. Most investors are passive investors, and whatever they're promising you, they're not really going to do or be able to do. So be really, really careful who you let into your home, basically, right? Because this is going to be your life's work. And the last thing you want is you don't want additional stress. So be really careful. And especially in the Singapore VC community, it's actually a very new venture capital community, to be honest with you. There's, like, in my opinion, only like 5 actual firms that matter. And even in those firms, I find the partners and the people that work there to be still on the early stage of understanding businesses, and they're very risk averse as well, right? So I wouldn't be too, focused on just the Singapore market if you do raise money. And if you read this article that I shared with you, I think it'll help you as well understand more things there. So another question I have is, what kind of market research do you have to do, and how important was it for your company? So market research is super, super important. And for every business that I've done a lot of market research. But the problem isn't to do market research. The problem is that you should solve is to do the right market research. So if you're asking the right questions to the right people, right? So for example, I'm building something right now, which is a new startup. I haven't disclosed anything about it, but basically I have about 15 people who are trialing my software that I've built, right? Of those 15 people, it's not everybody that I know. Initially, there was about 30 people that I was going to reach out to. But before I even gave them the software, I spoke with them about their habits of how they, consume content, right? Some people liked certain ways of consuming content. They like reading books. They like watching movies. Some people, like reading Twitter, right? For example. So there's a whole spectrum of it. My product fits in one of those categories. It doesn't fit in all categories. So first thing that I think before you do any market research, make sure you're researching the right market, right? So if you start asking questions to the wrong people, you're going to get wrong answers. Those wrong answers are going to go into your feedback loop and you're going to end up with the wrong product. And I don't want that to happen. So when I started my last startup, which was in Hong Kong and Singapore, I actually spoke with a lot of our potential customers, which I thought at that time were going to be our potential customers. And these were like small restaurants and stores in Hong Kong and Singapore. And we got a lot of positive feedback, a lot of research through that. And I did it by actually going and meeting them. So I actually went into restaurants, met the manager when they weren't busy. And I said, hey, I'm building something. I would love 30 minutes of your time. Can you tell me what are your problems? Tell me how you solve it right now. How would you like it if I solved it this way? Would that make your life better? All that stuff. So actual physical research is important. I'm not a believer of like computer research, like, go just search articles on Google and look at market size estimates that some analyst at McKinsey has put out. That's not relevant, right? Everybody is going to tell you some interesting thing. But in this situation, what I think you should do, any startup you make, go talk to the people who are ultimately going to use it, right? If you're building an app for old people, senior citizens, go talk to 30 senior citizens in your community and specifically talk to them, right? Hey, here's what I'm building. What do you think? What are your problems? If you're building an app for, let's just say, gyms in Singapore, go talk to every gym owner who's going to be ultimately not only using the product, but also buying the product, right? There's a difference. Sometimes someone buys the product, but someone else uses it. For example, right now, let's take an example. Let's say in US, in Singapore, you guys might have some software that you use. The university is the one who purchases the software for you guys to use, but ultimately you're the user, right? So sometimes the buyer and the user can be different. Make sure whatever you're building, you're speaking to both the buyer and the user. And sometimes that person is the same person. Sometimes that person is different. So hopefully that should be easy for you to answer. Hopefully that answers your question on market research. Next question I have is, what is the best time for a startup to be incorporated? Is it at the beginning? So look, I think one of the issues with starting a startup is early stage, people love doing the early things. And I have this problem as well. Very quickly when I get an idea, I'll buy a domain name, I'll incorporate it, I'll figure out the font colors and the logo and all this, creative stuff. None of that stuff matters, right? The most important stuff that matters is actually building the product, or building the MVP, the minimally viable product. So I wouldn't be worried about incorporation or any of that stuff. I would just focus on the product and build a small product that you can give to one customer. That's it. That should be your only goal for the first 3 months or 6 months, whatever it is. Build it so that one person can use it. When one person can use it and they love it, then get it to 10 people. When they love it, then get it to 50 and then 100 and hopefully 1 million in the future. Small baby steps. Now, in terms of incorporation, look, incorporation, all that stuff is super easy to do. And I don't want you to be bogged down in it and incur additional costs, because initially, no matter how successful you are, you're not going to have over 1,000 customers in the first 6 months, depending on the type of startup you're doing. So don't get worried about that stuff. Just focus on the building. As soon as you'll realize that the startup actually becomes real, the forces of running a company will force you to incorporate. So for example, let's say you get to a stage where you have 1,000 customers and you're about to get a big customer now. And the big customer is like, all right, Jenny, send me an invoice with the name of the company. So you'll be forced to then incorporate the business, right? Similarly, let's just say the business is doing well and within 3 months, some investors like, hey, Jenny, I want to put in $100,000 in. Can you please send me your bank account? you can't send him or her Jenny at HSBC, right? You will have to send her, app domain incorporated, whatever, bank account. So the forces of running a business will force you to incorporate, and it'll come naturally. So don't bog yourself down in this legal work, immigration, admin, all that stuff. None of that stuff actually matters. Next one, thank you for answering my question. That was a great answer. Okay, cool. Can I know why not to raise money from celebrities? Okay, so there's a lot of celebrities, from investors to musicians to tech celebrities to artists to just rich people that are, in our network of friends and family. The reason I say you shouldn't raise money from them is, these people aren't professional investors, right? Professional investors understand the risks involved, right? That's number one. They understand there's a 99% chance I will lose my money. Number one. Now, when you're running a startup as a founder, you already have 99 million stresses. The last thing you want is someone who's a not professional investor bugging you and scaring you from all the aspects of like, hey, is my money still good, or what's happening, all that stuff. So that's number one. They don't understand risk of a startup, which is the maximum risk one can take in terms of a financial instrument. And you'll most likely lose their money and they're not going to be happy, number one. Number two, they're not sophisticated enough to understand the journey of a startup. Like I remember I had an investor who was leading my round in my last company. And once the money was raised, a month later, he called me. He's like, hey, so how's the software? Do we have any customers? And it was only a month. And I was like, dude, like, we don't even have a software built. Like, we don't even have like a simple function built, right? What do you mean customers, right? And then he was like, okay, I need an update every 2 weeks from you. I'm like, dude, nothing happens in 2 weeks. In startups, like things happen over 3 months or 6 months period of time. So you don't want this additional stress of getting someone who's not sophisticated, and then they basically act as if they're VVIP and they start asking you all these questions and basically creating all this additional stress. And you don't want it. As a founder, you need to control your startup and own it. And if that means you raise $100,000 less because you don't have that celebrity, that's a better deal. And the other thing is, a lot of times you'll think when you have a celebrity, it's going to help you raise more money and give you traction and marketing by saying, oh, this guy's on my company, or, LeBron James is on my company, whatever. That thing is cool to say once. After that, you can't repeat it every time, right? Every person you meet, you can't say, hey, LeBron James is on my startup. No, your startup has to speak for itself, right? And LeBron James is not going to help you, right? He's a busy guy. He's a busy celebrity, right? So just getting a celebrity actually adds more stresses to your life versus reducing them. Now, later on, if your company is great and already, doing great things, when you have the power in your hand, right, in your control, yeah, go for it. Go raise money from other celebrities and stuff, because now you can control it. Now, if let's just say Elon Musk wants to put money in your startup, great, let him in, right? But early on, don't rely on celebrities. They're not going to be helpful. It just doesn't work. All right, so next question I have is, hey, Sherjan, thank you for the session. I have 2 questions. Could you provide some color on how to find and pick your co-founder? Okay, so co-founder is one of the most important decisions you'll make. First thing I'll say is you don't always need a co-founder, right? And I know a lot of investors will disagree when I say that, but I disagree with them. Some things are better done with one person in control. Some things are better done with 2 people in control, right? So really understand what you're building. And if it's something that you can build yourself or control yourself and own yourself, and I'm not saying own from an aspect of equity. I mean, own as a product, like, have full visionary control of it, do it yourself. Now, if you find yourself that, hey, I'm not an expert at something and I need someone else so that together we'll be stronger, 1 + 1 = 3, then go get a co-founder, right? So that's just important to understand. Not all startups need co-founders. And don't get a co-founder just because the world says you need a co-founder, or, hey, it looks better optically, all that stuff. No, that's not the right reason, right? If you look at some of the best companies in the world, they don't have co-founders. Amazon, no co-founder. Facebook, there were some co-founders, but we only know about Mark Zuckerberg, right? Same with Elon Musk, right? Same with Apple, right? Yes, Wozniak was part of Steve Jobs, but we only know about Steve Jobs, right? So point is, you got to really understand there's a lot of businesses out there who are actually solo-led. And if you want to be solo-led, be solo-led. Now, when you do go look for a co-founder, all right, so Nigel's saying we have 5 more minutes. All right, so I'll answer this question quickly, guys. So if you do want to look for a co-founder, I think the best way to do it is just have conversation with as many people who are in the same boat as you, right? That's the most important part. Don't get a co-founder who has a different living situation than you. For example, if a co-founder has a really good job, has a bunch of money, and you don't have any money and you're sleeping on a friend's couch, right? Find people that are in the same social economic bracket as you, because when stuff gets tough, which is the hardest part, and that's usually the case, the person who has a comfortable life, it's not going to feel the same pain as you will, right? So find people that are in the same boat as you and have conversation with them, and meet as many of them that you can. Once you meet someone that you like, do a mini project with them. Do a 3-month project with them. Could be anything. Could be like, hey, I want to work with you for a bit on this thing. Don't talk about equity, this, that, whatever. And see how that work feels like. The more time you spend with someone, the more you realize that they're a good fit for you or not. And guys, some of these questions will be answered better in the article I shared with you. So you can go. I'll answer this one last question, and then we can end it. So is in investing or startups or being a co-founder, what do you think are the red flags to look for in terms of the business model? I think, from my perspective personally, my red flags are, businesses that are too, hey, it's going to work, but it's going to work 5 years from now, right? For me, that's a red flag. So like, hey, we got to do this, then we got to do this, then we got to do this, then it'll become profitable. No, that's not good, right? So it's kind of like, these mattress companies that we know about, like, hey, we'll sell the mattress first and we'll lose money. Then we'll sell pillows, we'll lose less money. Then we'll sell bed sheets and then we'll be profitable. That's not how a business should work. That's too much of a rosy, a lot of things have to go right. For me, the best business models are like, hey, I buy this number of lemons, I sell them for twice the cost that I bought them for, and I made, profit. That's very basic. So as any business model that you do, focus on that. But anyways, guys, this could be a much deeper conversation, but I know we have to leave. But I just want to say thank you to everybody. If you guys have any questions and stuff, you can always reach out to me, and I'll put my website in that you guys can look at. So sherjan.com is my website. You can find additional information there. I have a newsletter that I share on a weekly basis called Mentor Mondays. So subscribe to that, and I always give advice on that. The other part is you can find me on LinkedIn, I'm Sherjan, and on Twitter, I'm Sherjan as well. So if there's anything that you guys need and stuff, Twitter is probably the best way to connect with me, and I'm happy to tweet back. One final thing I'll just leave you, definitely if you guys are interested in doing a startup, do it. You're young. You have 50, 60 years to fail. So get it done. Enjoy it. It's a great experience. Everybody should do it, and you'll learn 10 years worth of stuff within a year. I can guarantee. All right, guys. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sherjan.
Thank you.
No worries.
Thank you.
Guys, thanks for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.